The desert night swallowed sound like a living thing. Lieutenant Kira Brennan pressed her eye against the scope of her M24 sniper rifle, watching the Iraqi Republican Guard compound through crosshairs that trembled with each heartbeat. 23 degrees Celsius, wind speed 8 miles per hour from the northeast. Distance to primary target, 647 yards. Numbers. In the dark, numbers were the only truth that mattered. She was 24 years old, the youngest member of Silent Shadow, the only woman, and in exactly 90 seconds, she would become something the world would spend the next 3 decades trying to erase. Shadow 3, this is Shadow Lead. The voice of Gunnery Sergeant Wade Holloway crackled through her earpiece. 35 years old, married, 2 daughters waiting in North Carolina. We have eyes on the package. Thatcher's pinned down in the southwest corner. Multiple hostiles. We're going in. Kira shifted her position on the ridge. Below, the compound sprawled like a warren of concrete and shadow. Somewhere in that maze, CIA asset, Alden Thatcher, was bleeding out with intelligence that could change the course of the war. Somewhere in that darkness, her teammates were about to walk into hell. Shadow 2 confirms, said Staff Sergeant Finn O'Malley. 32 years old, demolitions expert, told jokes even when mortars were falling. Charges set on the east wall. On your mark, lead. Shadow 4 ready, Corporal Lucas Donovan. 29 years old, communications specialist. Engaged to a girl from Texas he'd met at basic training. Radio check with air support in 30 seconds. Kira keyed her mic. Shadow 3, Overwatch position. I have clear sight lines on targets Alpha through Echo. Copy 3, stand by for... The transmission died. Not faded, not interrupted, died. Like someone had cut the throat of the radio itself. Kira's finger moved to the backup channel. Static. She cycled through all 7 frequencies. Nothing but white noise in the hammering of her own pulse. The Caldwell Defense Systems tactical radio, $32,000 of encrypted military hardware, had just become a 4-pound paperweight. And in the compound below, 3 men were running toward an ambush with no way to call for air support, no way to coordinate, no way to know that the entire operation had just gone dark. Kira watched through her scope as Holloway's team breached the east wall. She saw the flash of O'Malley's charges, saw the concrete bloom into dust and fire, saw her teammates pour through the gap like smoke. Then she saw the Iraqi soldiers emerge from buildings on 3 sides. An L-shaped ambush, textbook, devastating. Holloway went to one knee, reaching for his radio. His mouth moved. Kira could read his lips even from 700 yards away. Air support! We need air support! But there was no air support, no cavalry, no backup. There was only a 24-year-old woman on a ridge with 17 rounds in her rifle, and a choice that would define the rest of her life. Kira's breathing slowed. Her heartbeat steadied. The world contracted to the circle of her scope. Target 1, Iraqi officer, 647 yards. Crosswind compensation, 0.2 mils right. Elevated heart rate adds 0.1 mil vertical. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle spoke, a language older than words. The officer dropped. Target 2, sniper in the northwest tower, 892 yards. Wind speed increasing. Adjust 0.4 mils. Squeeze. The sniper fell backward into darkness. Target 3 through 7, squad advancing on Holloway's position. Range 520 to 680 yards. Rapid succession. No time for perfect shots. Only killing shots. Squeeze. 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 5 men stopped advancing permanently. Kira worked the bolt. Brass casings tumbled into the sand beside her. She didn't count them, didn't need to. Every trigger pull was a memory that would outlive her bones. Below, Holloway's team fought their way toward the southwest corner, toward Thatcher. But the compound was a maze, and the enemy was everywhere. Target 8, machine gunner on the roof, 730 yards. He was setting up to enfilade her team's position. Kira put a round through his chest before his finger found the trigger. Target 9. RPG team emerging from a bunker. 610 yards. 2 men. She had 1 round chambered. She chose the man holding the launcher. He fell. The second man dove for cover. Kira reloaded and waited. Patience was the sniper's greatest weapon. 3 seconds. 5. 8. The man's head appeared above the sandbags. Target 10. The night continued its terrible arithmetic. 11. 12. 13. Kira lost track of time. There was only the scope, the trigger, the targets. Men became numbers. Numbers became silence. She saw Holloway reach Thatcher, saw O'Malley lay down covering fire, saw Donovan trying desperately to get the radio working, his hands moving over the equipment with increasing desperation. Then she saw the grenade arc through the air toward her team. O'Malley saw it too. For a moment, a fraction of a second that would replay in Kira's nightmares for 30 years, their eyes met across the distance. He smiled, that stupid, fearless smile he wore when he told jokes about his Irish grandmother. Then he stepped in front of the grenade. The explosion was a flash of white in her scope. When the smoke cleared, O'Malley was down. Not moving, would never move again. 14, 15, 16. Kira killed the men who had thrown the grenade, killed them with a cold precision that felt like prayer. Holloway was dragging Thatcher toward the breach. Donovan was pulling O'Malley's body. They were 10 yards from safety when the second ambush sprung. Soldiers poured from a building Kira's briefing maps had marked as empty. 20 men. 30. Too many. Holloway pushed Thatcher toward Donovan, turned back toward the enemy, raised his rifle. Kira knew what he was doing, buying time, trading his life for theirs. She put rounds into the advancing soldiers with mechanical efficiency, but there were too many. Even as men fell, others took their place. Holloway was shooting, reloading, shooting, a one-man wall between the living and the dead. Then he went down, not from a bullet, from sheer numbers. They swarmed him. Kira watched through her scope, helpless, as Wade Holloway, husband, father, friend, disappeared under a tide of violence. She killed the men who killed him, all of them. Target 17. Her rifle went silent, out of ammunition, out of time. Below, Donovan had gotten Thatcher through the breach, but he was going back, trying to reach Holloway, trying to save a man who was already gone. Kira screamed into her dead radio, "Donovan, no! Extract! Extract!" He couldn't hear her. She watched him die trying to save a ghost. The silence that followed was absolute. Kira lay on the ridge, her rifle empty, her teammates dead, her radio useless. Below, Thatcher was crawling toward the extraction point, leaving a trail of blood in the sand. He would die too, if she didn't move. Kira Brennan had been trained for many things: shooting, tactics, survival. But in that moment, she learned something no instructor could teach. She learned what it meant to be the one who lived. She slid down the ridge, crossed 4 miles of hostile desert with a wounded CIA officer on her back. Every step was a betrayal of the men she'd left behind. Every breath was stolen from the air they'd never breathe again. When the extraction helicopter found them at dawn, Thatcher was unconscious. Kira was covered in his blood and her own tears. The pilot tried to help her aboard. She pushed him away, turned back toward the compound. "I have to get them," she said. "I have to bring them home." "Ma'am," the pilot said gently, "they're gone. We have to leave. Now." Kira looked at the desert, at the place where 3 good men had become statistics. She reached into her vest and pulled out a single brass casing, the 17th round, the last kill. With her combat knife, she carved a number into the brass, 17. Then she climbed into the helicopter. She didn't look back, couldn't. If she looked back, she would see the truth written in the sand. She had survived. They had not. and no amount of kills would ever balance that equation. 32 years later, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, present day. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and old grudges. Colonel Kira Brennan stood at the head of the table, 56 years old and tired in ways that had nothing to do with age. Her uniform was immaculate. Her posture was perfect. Her hands were steady. But inside, she was still 24 years old and lying in the sand, watching men die. The Precision Marksman Female Integration Initiative represents a comprehensive restructuring of our sniper training pipeline. Her voice carried across the room with the calm authority of someone who had learned to speak to men who didn't want to listen. Current doctrine excludes qualified candidates based solely on gender. This program will establish merit-based selection criteria that, merit-based, Colonel Drake Whitmore's voice cut through her presentation like a blade. 45 years old, Pentagon connections, a legacy family that had been producing officers since the Revolutionary War. That's an interesting phrase, Colonel Brennan. Tell me, what merit qualifies you to redesign sniper doctrine? Kira met his eyes. She'd known men like Whitmore her entire career, men who looked at her uniform and saw only the woman wearing it. 27 years of operational experience, she said evenly, including multiple combat deployments and administrative deployments. Whitmore leaned back in his chair, addressing the other officers at the table rather than her. Colonel Brennan's service record is certainly lengthy, but let's be honest about what it contains. Logistics, training coordination, personnel management. She's never led troops in actual combat, never called fire missions, never made life or death tactical decisions in the field. Murmurs rippled through the room. Kira saw the calculation in their eyes. Whitmore was giving them permission to doubt her, permission to dismiss everything she'd built. With all due respect, Colonel, she began. Respect, Whitmore smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. You want respect? Then tell us. Tell us about your combat experience, your battlefield accomplishments. Give us something besides PowerPoint presentations and inclusion initiatives. The room fell silent. 14 senior officers watched her, waiting, judging. In the back row, a man in his late 50s shifted in his seat. Retired General Alden Thatcher, 4 stars on his dress uniform, 73 combat decorations, and a bullet scar on his left shoulder that had stopped bleeding 32 years ago in a desert that officially didn't exist. Kira looked at him. For a moment, their eyes met. She saw recognition there, and fear. She turned back to Whitmore. Colonel Whitmore, she said quietly, have you ever asked your uncle about Operation Silent Shadow? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Whitmore's smile froze. I don't know what you're talking about. No, Kira said, you wouldn't. It's classified above your clearance level. But General Thatcher knows, don't you, sir? Every head turned toward the back of the room. Thatcher had gone pale. His coffee cup trembled in his hand. For a moment, he looked like he was seeing a ghost, which in a way he was. Colonel Brennan, he started. Ask him, Kira said to Whitmore, her voice cutting across the general's words. Ask your uncle about the record for most confirmed kills in a single night during Desert Storm. Before it was classified, before it was buried, before the government decided some truths were too dangerous to acknowledge. Whitmore stood, his face flushing red. This is absurd. You're making wild claims about Silent Shadow. Kira pronounced each syllable like a bullet. February 24th, 1991. One night, 3 KIA, 1 survivor. The coffee cup slipped from Thatcher's hand. It hit the polished wood of the conference table and shattered, spraying liquid across classified briefing documents. But the general didn't notice. He was on his feet, his face ashen, his hands gripping the back of the chair in front of him. Everyone out, he said. His voice carried the weight of 30 years of command. Absolute, unchallengeable. Sir? Whitmore turned toward him. We haven't finished the briefing. Now! Thatcher's shout echoed off the walls. This meeting is concluded. Every officer in this room will exit immediately. That is not a request. For a moment, nobody moved. Then chairs scraped. Papers rustled. 14 senior officers filed toward the door with the practiced efficiency of men who knew when to ask questions and when to simply obey. Whitmore lingered, his face a mask of confusion and wounded pride. Uncle Alden, I don't understand. Out, Drake, Thatcher's voice was cold. And you will forget the last 2 minutes of this conversation. You will never speak those words again. You will never research that operation. You will accept that some things are above your pay grade and move on. Am I clear? Whitmore looked between his uncle and Kira. His mouth worked silently. Then he nodded once and left. The door closed with a sound like a coffin lid. Kira and Thatcher stood alone in the wreckage of her career. Coffee pooled on the table. Documents curled at their edges. The air between them was thick with 32 years of silence. Have you lost your mind? Thatcher's whisper was harsh, desperate. That name doesn't exist. That program never happened. You know what invoking it could mean. Kira walked to the window. Outside, young soldiers ran formation on the training fields. Boys and girls who thought war was about honor and heroism, who didn't yet know that it was mostly about dying in the dark while radios failed and nobody came. I know exactly what it means, sir, she said. I also know I've spent 3 years watching men like Whitmore dismiss everything I bring to this table because they see a woman with an administrative service record. They have no idea what I've done, what I'm capable of. That's the point, Kira. Thatcher moved to stand beside her. Up close, she could see the toll of 60 years. The lines around his eyes, the silver in his hair, the weight of secrets that had bent his spine. The people who served in that program gave up the right to recognition. You knew that when you signed on. We all did. Kira turned to face him. And I've honored that agreement for 32 years. Watched my teammates' families believe they died in training accidents. Watched inferior officers rise above me because my real service doesn't exist on paper. Stayed silent while men questioned my qualifications. Then why speak now? Because last week someone with Pentagon-level clearance accessed the classified files on Operation Silent Shadow. Kira's voice was flat. Someone knows. Someone is digging. And if they're coming for the truth anyway, I'd rather control how it comes out. Thatcher's face went from pale to gray. He sank into the nearest chair. Who accessed the files? He asked. I don't know. The request was routed through 3 different offices before it hit the archive. Someone wanted to hide their tracks. And you think it's connected to Whitmore? To your training program? I think it's connected to Caldwell Defense Systems. Kira sat down across from him. The company that manufactured the radios that failed that night, the company that's owned by the Whitmore family, the company that lost a $300 million government contract 6 months after Silent Shadow was shut down. Understanding dawned in Thatcher's eyes. You think they're trying to bury you before you can expose what really happened. I think they've been trying to bury it for 32 years. Kira leaned forward. And I think they're willing to bury anyone who gets in their way. Thatcher ran a hand over his face. The gesture made him look older than his 60 years. Tired. Defeated. I can't verify anything officially, he said. If Whitmore files a complaint, if he demands an investigation into your claims, I won't be able to protect you without exposing the entire program. 47 families believe their loved ones died in training accidents. You want to destroy that peace? I want them to know their children died as heroes, not statistics, even if it means destroying yourself in the process. Kira thought about a brass casing with the number 17 carved into it. Thought about 3 men who had given everything so she could live. Thought about 32 years of silence that had felt like slowly drowning. Yes, she said, even then. Thatcher stood, walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the handle. Kira, he said without turning, I owe you my life. That debt is unpayable. But what you're doing, it puts a target on your back that I can't remove. Whitmore's family has resources most people can't imagine. If they decide you're a threat, then they'll find out I'm harder to kill than they think. Thatcher looked back at her. For a moment, she saw the 28-year-old CIA officer bleeding in the sand, saw the man she'd carried 4 miles through hostile territory, saw the fear in his eyes that had nothing to do with bullets and everything to do with the woman who had refused to leave him behind. "Be careful," he said. "Whatever is in those sealed files needs to stay sealed. For your sake, for mine, for everyone who served alongside you." Then he was gone. Kira sat alone in the empty conference room. Outside, the sun was setting over Fort Bragg. 32 years ago, it had risen over a desert compound in Iraq. Same sun, same light, different woman. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in 3 years. It rang 4 times. Then a gravelly voice answered. "Brennan, I was wondering when you'd call." "Hello, Sterling," Kira said. "I need your help." Command Sergeant Major Vaughn Sterling, retired, 78 years old and still sharp as broken glass. The man who had taught her to shoot. The man who had turned a scared 22-year-old recruit into the deadliest sniper of her generation. "Help with what?" he asked. "Someone's trying to erase Silent Shadow," Kira said. "I need to know who, and why, and how to stop them." Silence on the line. Then, "Come to the farmhouse, tonight. And Brennan?" "Yes, sir?" "Bring your rifle. If they're coming for you, they're coming for all of us." The line went dead. Kira stood, straightened her uniform, walked out of the conference room with her head high and her shoulders back. Every eye in the corridor tracked her. Whispers followed her like smoke. Let them whisper, she thought. Let them wonder. The ghost was done staying silent. 2,147 hours. Sterling's farmhouse, 40 miles outside Fort Bragg. The house sat at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by 40 acres of pine forest and shadows. Kira parked her Jeep and sat for a moment, letting the engine tick in the cooling night. Through the windows, she could see Sterling moving around inside, still vigorous despite his years, still dangerous. She climbed out. The night air was cool. Somewhere in the trees, an owl called. The sound reminded her of Iraq, of nights when every noise could be death approaching on soft feet. Sterling opened the door before she reached the porch. "You're late," he said. "Hit traffic on I-95. "Traffic," he snorted. "In my day, we'd have taken the back roads." "In your day, the back roads were dirt." Sterling's face cracked into something that might have been a smile. "Get inside before mosquitoes drain you dry." The farmhouse interior smelled like gun oil and old wood. Sterling had lived here for 20 years, ever since retirement. The walls were covered with photographs, medals and shadow boxes. A life in service preserved in frames and fading memories. "Coffee?" Sterling asked. "I'd rather talk about why someone's accessing Silent Shadow files." Direct as always, he poured 2 cups anyway, handed her one. "Follow me." He led her through the kitchen to a door she'd never noticed before, down a set of stairs into a basement that should have been dark and dusty, but was instead lit by fluorescent bulbs and lined with filing cabinets. And on the far wall, a sight that stopped Kira's breath. Photographs, hundreds of them, young faces in military uniforms, class photos from sniper school, training exercises, graduation ceremonies. 127 faces. 43 of them had black ribbons draped across their frames. Kira walked to the wall slowly, found the 3 faces she was looking for. Wade Holloway, Finn O'Malley, Lucas Donovan. Black ribbons, forever young. "I keep this wall," Sterling said quietly, "to remember that every skill I taught could save a life or take one. Most of these kids live because of what I showed them. Some died anyway. And 3, his voice caught. 3 died because equipment failed them when it shouldn't have." Kira touched Holloway's photograph. He was grinning, always grinning. "You've been investigating Caldwell Defense," she said. It wasn't a question. "For 32 years. Sterling opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. "Started the week after I heard about the Silent Shadow casualties. Something didn't add up. Good operators, good mission, bad outcome. So I started digging." He spread papers across a workbench. Technical diagrams, incident reports, casualty lists. 14 incidents between 1988 and 2003, Sterling said, all involving Caldwell Defense Systems communication equipment, all resulting in casualties, all officially blamed on enemy action or operator error. He tapped one document. 47 dead soldiers. 47 families told their children died serving their country, which is true, but not complete. Kira scanned the documents. The pattern was clear, undeniable. They knew, she said. Caldwell knew their equipment was faulty and they kept selling it. Not just selling it, covering it up, bribing procurement officials, falsifying test data, making sure every investigation came back clean. Sterling's hands shook. With age or rage, Kira couldn't tell. "I've been collecting evidence for 3 decades, piece by piece. But I'm an old man with no official standing. Nobody listens." "What about official channels? Inspector General? Congress?" "I tried. In 1995, got stonewalled. In 2001, got threatened. In 2008, got burglarized." Sterling gestured to the basement. "That's when I started keeping everything in multiple locations and making sure certain people knew that if something happened to me, the files would go public." "Someone broke in," Kira said, understanding the timeline. 2 months ago?" Sterling nodded. "Professionals. Didn't take anything obvious. Just copied files. Made sure I knew they'd been here. Message received. We know what you know, and we can reach you anytime." Kira thought about her own apartment, about a brass casing with 17 carved into it. "I need to check something," she said. She pulled out her phone, called her building's security office. The guard who answered sounded bored until she asked him to check her apartment via the security camera feed. The boredom vanished. "Ma'am, you need to come home. Right now." "What's wrong?" "Your apartment. It's been..." "Someone's been inside." Kira thanked him and hung up, met Sterling's eyes. "They were in my place too," she said. "Take anything?" "I won't know until I check, but I think I know what they were looking for." The brass casing. The physical proof that 17 kills had happened. The one piece of evidence she'd kept from a night that officially never occurred. "Kira," Sterling's voice was serious, heavy with the weight of bad news. "There's something else you need to know. Master Sergeant Ellis Grayson. You remember him?" Ellis, Shadow 5. The other survivor of that night in Iraq. The man who'd driven the extraction vehicle while Kira carried Thatcher to safety. "What about him?" "He's alive, living in Wyoming, off the grid. But he called me last week, said he'd been receiving death threats. Anonymous, professional. Told him to keep his mouth shut about old operations or accidents might happen." Kira felt ice in her stomach. There were only 4 of us who survived Silent Shadow. Me, you, Thatcher, and Ellis. If they're threatening Ellis and burglarizing you, then someone's hunting everyone who knows the truth, Sterling finished the thought. And they've already had one success. "What do you mean?" Sterling pulled out another file. Newspaper clipping. Obituary. Master Sergeant Rowan Cross, age 71, died in a single-vehicle accident when his car left a mountain road in Colorado. Rowan, Shadow 6, the medic who'd saved Thatcher's life with field surgery while bullets snapped overhead. "This was last year," Kira said, 3 days after he gave an interview to a military history podcast about Desert Storm. Didn't mention Silent Shadow specifically, but he talked about equipment failures, about how good soldiers died because of faulty gear. Sterling's jaw tightened. A week later, his brakes failed on a mountain road. Investigators called it mechanical failure, but Rowan maintained his vehicles like a religion. He was a medic. Precision was his life. Kira stared at the obituary, at Rowan's smiling face. Another ghost added to her collection. They killed him, she said. Can't prove it, but yes, I think they did. Sterling closed the file. Which means you're in danger. Ellis is in danger. Hell, even Thatcher might be, though his rank probably protects him. And you? I'm an old man who lives alone in the woods. If I die, they'll call it natural causes and move on. Sterling met her eyes. But you're young enough to fight, visible enough to matter. If you go public with what happened to Silent Shadow, you become a threat they can't ignore. Kira thought about Whitmore's face in that conference room, about Thatcher's fear, about a brass casing that might already be in enemy hands. They're already ignoring me, she said. I'm just an administrative officer with no combat record. Nobody takes me seriously. That's about to change. Sterling gestured to his wall of photographs, of the 43 dead soldiers. You speak up about Silent Shadow. You're not just defending yourself. You're speaking for every soldier who died because someone prioritized profit over protection. I could be court-martialed, dishonorably discharged, charged with violating classification protocols. You could, Sterling nodded, or you could be the one who finally tells the truth. Your choice, kid, but make it soon, because whoever's hunting us is getting bolder. Kira stood, walked back to the wall, looked at Holloway's photograph, at O'Malley's, at Donovan's. 3 men who had died in silence, who had sacrificed everything for a mission that officially never happened, who deserved better than to be forgotten. She reached out and touched the black ribbon on Holloway's frame. I carried Wade's dog tags for 6 months before they made me turn them in, she said quietly. Wore them under my uniform, against regulations, but I needed to feel them. To remember that he was real, that what happened was real. Sterling said nothing, just waited. The official report said he died in a helicopter crash during a training exercise. His wife got a flag and a letter from the president. His daughters got a father they can't remember, except from photographs. Kira's voice was steady, no tears. She'd used those up 32 years ago. Every Memorial Day they visit a grave that contains an empty casket. Because his body was never recovered, because the mission never happened. Would you give them the truth? Sterling asked, even if it meant destroying the peace they found? They haven't found peace. They've found a lie that looks like peace. Kira turned to face him. Eleanor Holloway calls me every year on Wade's birthday, has since 1991. She asked me if I knew her husband, if I served with him, what he was like. What do you tell her? I lie. Say I met him briefly, that he seemed like a good man, that I'm sorry for her loss. Kira's hands clenched into fists. But what I want to say is that her husband died saving my life, that his last act was pushing a wounded CIA officer towards safety while buying time with his own blood, that he was the bravest man I ever knew, that his sacrifice mattered. Sterling nodded slowly. Then it's decided. What is? You're going to tell the truth. Consequences be damned, because that's who you are, who you've always been. He smiled, a rare expression on his weathered face. I trained you to shoot straight, but you came to me already knowing how to stand straight. That's not something I can teach. Kira wanted to argue, to find a rational reason to stay silent, to protect herself and her career and the fragile peace of families who believed their loved ones had died cleanly. But she thought about that conference room, about Whitmore's sneer, about being dismissed and underestimated and erased, about 17 brass casings in the sand and 3 men who would never dismiss anyone again. I need evidence, she said, more than stories, more than classified files I can't access. Something concrete that I can use to prove Caldwell Defense knew their equipment was faulty. I have something, Sterling said. He pulled out a locked box from the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet. Inside was a radio, battered, scorched, 32 years old. This is from the Silent Shadow operation, Sterling said. I acquired it during the investigation. Been holding on to it ever since. Kira stared at the radio, at the device that had failed when she needed it most, that had killed 3 men as surely as any bullet. "Have you had it analyzed?" she asked. "Privately, by a forensic electronics expert I trust. The defect is clear. Manufacturing flaw in the encryption module. Would have been obvious if Caldwell had done proper quality control testing." Sterling handed her a technical report. But they didn't. They rushed production to meet contract deadlines, and soldiers died. Kira took the report, the evidence, the proof. "This could end them," she said. "It could end you too. Use it wisely." A phone rang. Kira's personal cell. She looked at the screen. Unknown number. "Brennan," she answered. "Colonel Brennan?" A woman's voice, young, nervous. "This is Captain Fiona McLeod, JAG Corps. I've been assigned to contact you regarding a formal inquiry." Kira's stomach dropped. "What kind of inquiry?" "I'm sorry to inform you that Colonel Drake Whitmore has filed a formal complaint alleging falsification of military records. Specifically, he claims you've made fraudulent statements regarding combat service that doesn't appear in any official documentation." A pause. "You're being summoned to appear before a preliminary inquiry board in 72 hours. I'm assigned as your defense counsel." "I see. Colonel, I need you to understand the seriousness of these charges. If the board finds probable cause, you'll face a court-martial. The minimum penalty would be discharge. The maximum," McLeod's voice wavered, "the maximum is imprisonment." Kira looked at Sterling, at the wall of dead soldiers, at the radio that had killed them. "Captain McLeod," she said, "do you have any family in the military?" A confused pause. My niece just enlisted. She's 19, wants to be a sniper." "Then you have a personal stake in this case. Because if I'm lying about my service, your niece will never get the chance to prove herself. But if I'm telling the truth, and they bury me for it, she'll face the same barriers I've faced for 32 years. Silence on the line. Then, "Colonel, are you saying you can prove your service record is accurate?" "I'm saying I can prove a lot more than that, but I'll need a defense attorney who's willing to fight, not just file paperwork and negotiate plea deals. Actually fight." Another pause, longer this time. "My niece's name is Skylar," McLeod said finally. "She looks up to you, keeps a photograph of you from a military magazine on her wall. She says she wants to be like you when she grows up." Kira closed her eyes, thought about a 24-year-old woman with a rifle and a mission and a future that had been stolen by equipment failure. "Then let's make sure she gets the chance," Kira said. "I'll see you at Fort Bragg, day after tomorrow, 0800 hours. Come prepared to fight, Colonel, because I promise you, I will." The line went dead. Sterling was watching her with an expression that might have been pride. 72 hours, he said. "They don't waste time, do they? They're scared, making them sloppy." Kira stood. "I need to go. Prep for the board. Figure out what I can say without violating classification." "You'll violate it anyway. Have to. Truth doesn't respect paperwork." "I know." Kira headed for the stairs, stopped, turned back. "Sterling, thank you for keeping this wall, for remembering them when nobody else could." The old man looked at his photographs. At 43 black ribbons and a lifetime of teaching young soldiers how to kill at distance. "Somebody has to," he said. "Somebody always has to." Kira climbed the stairs and walked out into the night. Behind her, Sterling's farmhouse glowed like a beacon. Ahead, Fort Bragg waited with courts and boards and men who wanted her silent. She thought about Eleanor Holloway, about a woman who called every year to hear lies about a husband who had died a hero. Not anymore, Kira thought. No more lies. The ghost was done hiding. The reckoning was coming. And this time she wouldn't be fighting alone. 0547 hours. Fort Bragg, 3 days before the inquiry board. Kira's apartment looked like a crime scene processed by ghosts. Nothing broken, nothing obviously disturbed, but everything wrong in ways only she would notice. The bookshelf was organized alphabetically. She kept it by subject. The coffee maker faced left. She always positioned it right for easier access with her dominant hand. And on her desk, in the exact center, sat a small brass object that hadn't been there when she left. The casing. Her casing. The 17th kill. But the number carved into it was gone, filed away. The brass was smooth now, blank, as if that night in Iraq had never happened, as if 17 kills were just a story someone made up. Kira picked it up, felt its weight. They'd returned it, not stolen it, returned it as a message. We can erase you. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Check your personnel file. Systems updated overnight. Kira opened her laptop, logged into the military personnel database, pulled up her service record. It had been rewritten, dates changed, duty stations altered. The gap where Silent Shadow had existed, those missing 6 months in 1991, was now filled with assignment to a logistics unit in Germany, complete with fake performance reviews, fake duty logs, fake everything. On paper, she had never been in Iraq, had never fired a shot in combat, had never existed as anything but an administrator shuffling papers in an air-conditioned office. The documentation was flawless, professional, the kind of alteration that required access to classified systems and expertise in military record-keeping. The kind of alteration that would destroy her in 72 hours when she tried to prove she'd been somewhere the record said she hadn't. Her phone rang. Sterling. They hit me too, he said without preamble. Files from my basement. The copies I kept in 3 locations. All accessed, nothing taken, just examined, photographed. They know what we have. They're building a counter case, Kira said. Every piece of evidence we present, they'll have an explanation for. Every claim I make, they'll show documentation proving I'm lying. So what do we do? Kira looked at the blank brass casing, at the smooth surface where evidence used to be. We find evidence they can't erase, she said. Evidence that exists outside military systems, outside their control. Like what? Like the men who were there, the veterans who know the truth, the families who deserve answers. Kira grabbed her jacket. I'm calling in the old guard. 0823 hours. Sterling's farmhouse. Emergency assembly. 8 men sat around Sterling's dining table, ages ranging from 68 to 83. Combined military experience, 217 years. Combined confirmed kills as snipers and instructors, 1,043. This was the Marksman Brotherhood, the invisible network of men who had taught America's snipers for 5 decades. Men who knew every secret, every operation, every ghost who had ever put eye to scope and squeezed trigger. Sergeant Major Thaddeus Blackwell spoke first. 83 years old, Korean War veteran, 94 confirmed kills before they stopped counting. I trained snipers from 1954 to 1987, he said. His voice was gravel and tobacco smoke. Saw a lot of good kids die. Saw a lot of bad equipment get them killed. But I never saw corruption like this. Not at this level. Colonel Montgomery Pierce was 77. Silver hair, ramrod posture, eyes that had seen too much. My son died in Iraq, 2003. Captain Everett Pierce, 29 years old, father of twins. His hands shook slightly as he placed a photograph on the table. Young man, dress uniform, proud smile. Official report says he was KIA by enemy fire during an ambush. But I recovered his equipment from the field, against regulations, pulled strings, called in favors. Pierce slid a battered radio across the table toward Kira. Caldwell Defense Systems Tactical Radio. Serial number matches the batch from Silent Shadow. Same manufacturing defect. Same catastrophic failure mode. Pierce's voice was steady, but his eyes were wet. My son died calling for air support that never heard him. Just like your teammates. Same company, same defect, same lie. Master Gunnery Sergeant Callum Frost leaned forward. 72 years old, Gulf War sniper instructor, the man who had certified Kira as expert marksman in 1989. That makes at least 4 confirmed incidents with the same equipment failure signature, Frost said. Silent Shadow in 91, Pierce's son in '03, 2 others I've documented from Afghanistan in '07 and '12. All Caldwell Defense radios, all identical defects. How many total casualties? Kira asked. The men exchanged glances. Sterling pulled out a spreadsheet. 23 documented incidents between 1988 and 2003. 47 confirmed KIA. Possibly more we haven't identified yet. Sterling's finger traced down the list. All blamed on enemy action, operator error, or environmental factors. None attributed to equipment failure. Kira studied the names. 47 soldiers, 47 families, 47 lies that had survived for decades. Caldwell Defense knew, she said. They had to know. You don't have 23 identical failures across 15 years without recognizing a pattern. They knew. Blackwell's voice was hard. I submitted 3 formal equipment failure reports in the '80s. Detailed technical analysis. Recommendations for recall and redesign. All 3 were kicked back as unsubstantiated operator error. Someone killed those reports, Pierce said. Someone with enough pull to override field commanders and technical experts. Someone getting paid, Frost added. You don't cover up this level of negligence without financial incentive. Kira felt pieces clicking together, a pattern emerging from decades of scattered data. Whitmore, she said. Drake Whitmore is coming after me now because I'm threatening to expose his family's company. But this goes deeper than one corrupt contract. This is systematic fraud. Fraud, bribery, negligent homicide. Sterling ticked items off on his fingers. Possibly conspiracy to obstruct justice. If we can prove Caldwell Defense knew about the defects and paid people to hide them, we're looking at federal crimes. Can we prove it? Kira asked. The old soldiers looked at each other. A lifetime of shared experience passed between them in silence. Then Pierce reached into his jacket and pulled out a thumb drive. I've been investigating my son's death for 20 years, he said. Started as grief, became obsession, eventually became evidence. He slid the drive across to Kira. Financial records from Caldwell Defense, payments to procurement officials, bribes disguised as consulting fees. I obtained these through, let's call them unofficial channels. Are they admissible in court? Kira asked. Probably not, but they point to where official investigators should look. Pierce smiled without humor. Sometimes you need to show people the map before they'll start digging. Frost added his own thumb drive to the pile, then Blackwell, then 3 others, 6 drives, 20 years of private investigation, evidence collected by men who had lost students, colleagues, friends to equipment that should never have failed. We're giving you everything, Sterling said. All our research, all our documentation, all our credibility, because you're the one who can make this stick. You're active duty. You're the face they can't ignore. They're already ignoring me, Kira said. They've rewritten my service record, made me disappear on paper. Then we make them acknowledge you in person. Blackwell stood. Despite his age, he moved with military precision. We're old men. Most people dismiss us as relics telling war stories. But put 8 of us in uniform, standing together, and we become something else. We become witnesses. Witnesses to what? Kira asked. To you. Blackwell met her eyes. We trained you. We certified you. We know your capabilities. And when that inquiry board tries to claim you're fabricating your combat record, we'll be there to call them liars. Kira felt something shift in her chest. For 3 days she'd been fighting alone, carrying the weight of 3 decades of silence. Now these men, legends in their own right, were offering to stand with her. "If you do this," she said slowly, "you'll be violating classification protocols, confirming the existence of operations that officially never happened. You could face prosecution." "We're old," Frost said with a shrug. "What are they going to do? Take away our pensions? We've already buried too many students. If we have to burn our careers to save one more, so be it." Sterling placed a hand on Kira's shoulder. "You carried Thatcher 4 miles through hostile territory while bullets snapped past your head," he said quietly. "You think we won't walk a few hundred yards across Fort Bragg to stand beside you?" Kira looked around the table. At 8, men who represented 2 centuries of American military service. Men who had seen wars from Korea to Iraq. Who had taught thousands of soldiers to survive. Who had mourned hundreds who hadn't. "Thank you," she said. It felt inadequate, but it was all she had. "Don't thank us yet," Blackwell said. "We still need to survive the next 72 hours. And if Caldwell Defense is willing to falsify military records, they're willing to do worse." As if summoned by the words, Kira's phone buzzed. Text from Captain Fiona McLeod. "Need to meet. Urgent. Not at Fort Bragg. 1400 hours. Downtown Fayetteville. Daily Grind Coffee Shop." Kira showed the text to Sterling. "Could be a trap," he said. "Could be, but she's my assigned defense counsel. I need to trust someone." "Trust carefully," Blackwell advised. "In my experience, when lawyers want to meet off base, it's because they don't trust who's listening on base." 1357 hours. Daily Grind Coffee Shop. Downtown Fayetteville. The cafe was civilian territory. College students on laptops, mothers with strollers, retirees reading newspapers. No uniforms, no military structure, just people living lives that had nothing to do with war. Kira sat in a corner booth with sightlines to both entrances. Old habits, Sterling would have approved. Captain Fiona McLeod arrived 3 minutes early, 28 years old. Red hair pulled back in regulation bun, eyes that darted around the cafe before settling on Kira. She slid into the booth without ordering coffee. "We're being watched," McLeod said quietly. "Not here, at Fort Bragg. My office, your quarters, probably my apartment too." "Who's watching?" "I don't know, but someone's been accessing my case files, legally, with proper authorization codes, but at odd hours. Someone with clearance is monitoring every move I make on your defense." Kira absorbed this. "Whitmore has that kind of access?" "A colonel? No, but his family might." McLeod pulled out a tablet, shielded the screen from other patrons. "I did some research into Caldwell Defense Systems. The company's majority shareholder is Malcolm Whitmore Sr., Drake Whitmore's father, 73 years old, retired general, 4 stars. A 4-star would have access to classified personnel systems," Kira said, "and connections throughout the Pentagon, and resources to hire private investigators, and every reason to want you discredited before you can testify about equipment failures that could destroy his company." McLeod swiped through documents on her tablet. "Caldwell Defense is worth approximately $800 million. If your allegations become public, they'll face massive civil litigation from families of the 47 soldiers who died, plus potential criminal charges. The company would collapse." "So they're trying to collapse me first?" "Yes, and they're doing it legally, using official channels, making it look like legitimate inquiry into service record discrepancies." McLeod leaned forward. "Colonel, I need you to understand something. I'm a JAG officer. I believe in the system. I believe in due process and rules of evidence in proper procedure. But what's happening to you isn't the system working. It's the system being weaponized." "Can we fight it?" "Legally? With altered records and no accessible documentation, it'll be difficult." McLeod paused. "But I didn't become a lawyer to take easy cases. And my niece Skylar is counting on me to make sure women like you don't get erased." Kira studied the young officer, saw determination there, and something else, fear. What aren't you telling me? Kira asked. McLeod glanced around the cafe again. Then she pulled out her phone, showed Kira a text message from an unknown number. Your niece is 19. Basic training is dangerous. Accidents happen. Tell Colonel Brennan to consider retirement for everyone's safety. Ice crystallized in Kira's veins. They threatened Skylar? Last night, I filed a report with base security. They said they'd investigate, but the text came from a burner phone. Untraceable. McLeod's hands were shaking. I have two choices. Withdraw from your case to protect my niece, or fight harder, because if I back down now, Skylar will know her aunt folded under pressure. What did you choose? McLeod met her eyes. I'm here, aren't I? Kira felt respect for this young woman deepen. To face threats against family and still choose duty required courage most people never found. We need to be smart about this, Kira said. If they're watching official channels, we use unofficial ones. If they're monitoring Fort Bragg, we work outside the fence. And if they're threatening families, she paused, we make sure families become witnesses instead of targets. What do you mean? 47 soldiers died because of Caldwell defense equipment. That means 47 families who deserve the truth. Some of those families still live near military bases. Some probably have other members in service. And some might be willing to stand up if they knew what really happened to their loved ones. Understanding dawned in McLeod's eyes. You want to contact the families. I want to give them the choice. Keep believing the lie that's given them peace, or learn the truth that might give them justice. Kira pulled out her phone. Sterling has a list, names, addresses, next of kin information from his 32 years of investigation. We start making calls. That could backfire. Some families won't want to hear it. Some might even be hostile. I know, but some will listen. And the ones who listen become our witnesses. Our proof that this isn't about one colonel trying to save her career. It's about 47 families who deserve answers. McLeod nodded slowly. I'll need to be careful about how I participate. Attorney-client privilege only goes so far. But I can provide legal guidance on how to approach families without violating privacy laws or witness tampering statutes. Fair enough, Kira stood. One more thing, you should move Skylar off base. Get her somewhere Caldwell Defense can't reach her. Somewhere with people who can protect her if this gets worse. I was thinking the same thing. My parents live in Montana. Skylar's supposed to get leave next month. I'll see if we can move it up. They walked out of the cafe together. On the street, Fayetteville bustled with afternoon life. Normal people living normal days. Unaware that in quiet corners, old soldiers were preparing for a different kind of battle. Captain, Kira said as they reached their vehicles, thank you for believing me, for risking your niece's safety, for being the kind of lawyer who actually fights. McLeod smiled. My niece keeps your photograph on her wall, the one from Marine Corps Times where you're holding an M24. She wants to be you when she grows up. The smile faded. I need to make sure she gets the chance. That means making sure you're still standing when this is over. She drove away. Kira sat in her Jeep for a moment, thinking about a 19-year-old girl who wanted to be a sniper, who probably didn't know that the woman in the photograph had paid for every inch of her career in blood and silence. Her phone rang. Sterling. We have a problem, he said. Ellis called. Someone tried to run him off the road in Wyoming last night. Truck with no plates. Forced him into a ditch. He's okay, but his vehicle's totaled. Same pattern as Rowan, Kira said. Yeah, except Ellis is harder to kill than Rowan was. Former Force Recon. Still sharp. He saw it coming and managed to crash in a way that looked worse than it was. Sterling's voice was grim. But they're escalating, moving from surveillance and threats to actual violence. Did Ellis report it? To local sheriff, but without plates or witnesses, there's nothing to investigate. Just another accident in rural Wyoming. Kira made a decision. Tell Ellis to pack a bag and come here. North Carolina. He can stay at your farmhouse where we can watch his back. He won't like it. He's been off-grid for 20 years. Then remind him that Rowan wanted to stay off-grid too. Worked great until someone cut his brake lines. Kira started her Jeep. We need to gather everyone who knows the truth. Put them somewhere defendable. Make sure Caldwell Defense understands that if they want to silence us, they'll have to do it publicly. You're talking about making ourselves targets. We're already targets. I'm talking about making ourselves hard targets, the kind that shoot back. Sterling was quiet for a moment. Then, I'll call Ellis. Tell him the Brotherhood is assembling. That usually gets his attention. Good. And Sterling, make sure everyone's armed. If they came after Ellis with a truck, they might come after the rest of us with worse. She hung up, drove back toward Fort Bragg. Her mind was racing through scenarios, threats, countermeasures. 47 dead soldiers. 8 old warriors willing to testify. 1 terrified young lawyer. 1 19-year-old recruit being used as leverage. And somewhere in Virginia, Malcolm Whitmore Sr. sat in an office making decisions about how much violence was acceptable to protect $800 million. Kira's phone buzzed again. This time a call from an unknown number. She answered. Colonel Brennan? A man's voice, cultured, old money accent. Speaking, my name is Malcolm Whitmore. I believe you know my son, Drake. Kira pulled over, put the call on speaker, reached for the phone's record function. Mr. Whitmore, what can I do for you? I'd like to meet, tonight, discuss this unfortunate situation between you and my son. Perhaps we can reach an understanding before official proceedings become complicated. What kind of understanding? The kind that benefits everyone involved. Your career, your reputation, your future. A pause. There's a great deal at stake here, Colonel, for both of us. I'd hate to see it destroyed over a misunderstanding about events from 30 years ago. Kira's jaw tightened. Those events cost 3 men their lives. That's not a misunderstanding. 3 men died in service to their country. Tragic, honorable, but not relevant to current questions about your personnel record. Malcolm's voice was smooth, practiced. I'm offering you a chance to resolve this quietly, with dignity, without dragging painful memories through public inquiry. And if I refuse, then we proceed officially. The inquiry board reviews evidence, makes recommendations. You face potential court-martial for falsifying records. Your career ends in disgrace instead of honor. Malcolm paused. I'm trying to save you from that outcome, Colonel. Meet with me, hear my proposal, then decide. Kira thought fast. This was an opportunity, not to accept whatever bribe Malcolm was offering, but to get him on record, to make him reveal the corruption he was trying to hide. Where and when? She asked. Tonight, 8 p.m., there's a farmhouse 40 miles outside Fort Bragg, owned by a Master Sergeant Sterling. I believe you know it. Kira's blood went cold. Malcolm knew about Sterling's farmhouse, knew she'd been there, had probably been watching. I know it, she said carefully. Excellent. I'll see you there. Come alone, Colonel. This conversation requires privacy. I'll consider it. Please do. And Colonel, think carefully about what you're willing to sacrifice for pride. Some battles aren't worth fighting. The line went dead. Kira sat in her Jeep, mind racing. Malcolm Whitmore was coming to Sterling's farmhouse. Tonight, bringing his offer, his threats, his attempt to buy her silence. She called Sterling. We need to prepare for a visitor. 1947 hours, Sterling's farmhouse. Final preparations. 8 men moved through the farmhouse with practiced efficiency, checking sight lines, setting up recording equipment, preparing for a confrontation that had been 32 years in the making. Sterling pulled out a professional-grade digital audio recorder, set it prominently on the dining table where Malcolm would see it immediately. He'll bring counter-surveillance, Frost warned. Man like that doesn't walk into a meeting unprepared. He'll have jammers, scramblers, equipment to detect recording devices. Then we give him something to detect, Sterling said, gesturing to the obvious recorder. Let him think he's found our trap. Blackwell caught on immediately. While the real recording happens somewhere he won't look. Sterling moved to the antique clock on the wall, opened the back panel revealing a hidden compartment. Analog camera, battery-powered, no electronic signature, no wireless signal. Built in 1952, works like 1952. He showed them the simple mechanism. Malcolm's fancy equipment will find the digital recorder, won't even think to check a 70-year-old clock. Sneaky old bastard, Pierce said with approval. Blackwell was checking the perimeter. No vehicles within half a mile except ours. If he brings backup, we'll see them coming. Pierce sat at the dining table, his son's recovered radio in front of him. If Malcolm wants to deny Caldwell Defense's responsibility, I want him to explain this, face to face, father to father. Kira stood at the window, watching darkness fall over the pine forest. Somewhere out there, Malcolm Whitmore was driving toward this confrontation, confident, powerful, certain he could buy or threaten his way out of consequences. He didn't know he was walking into a room full of men who had spent lifetimes learning patience, who had mastered the art of waiting for the perfect shot. He'll offer money first, Frost predicted. Appeal to practicality, retirement with benefits, consulting fees, maybe a position in the private sector. When that fails, he'll threaten, Blackwell added, career destruction, legal consequences, maybe physical danger to people we care about. And when threats fail, Kira asked. Sterling smiled without humor. Then we'll see who Malcolm Whitmore really is. Strip away the money and the power and the family name. Find out if there's anything underneath but fear. Headlights appeared on the road, a black Mercedes SUV. Expensive. Armored, probably. The kind of vehicle that said its owner feared nothing because he could buy protection from everything. The vehicle stopped in front of the farmhouse. A man climbed out. Malcolm Whitmore Sr., 73 years old but still imposing. 6 feet tall, silver hair perfectly styled. Suit that cost more than most soldiers made in a month. The bearing of someone who had commanded armies and now commanded corporations. He walked to the door alone, knocked with confident authority. Sterling opened it. "Mr. Whitmore," he said. "Come in." Malcolm stepped inside, stopped. His eyes swept the room, taking in 8 old soldiers arranged around the space like pieces on a chessboard. His gaze landed immediately on the audio recorder sitting in plain view on Sterling's dining table. A thin smile crossed his face. Amateur hour. "I said to come alone, Colonel Brennan," he said to Kira. "No, you said the conversation required privacy. This is private. Everyone here is bound by classification protocols and personal loyalty." Kira gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. Say what you came to say." Malcolm remained standing. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small device no bigger than a phone, pressed a button. The recorder's LED light flickered. Died. "Electronic counter-surveillance jammer," Malcolm said, setting the device on the table. "Military grade, disables any recording device within 30 feet. He smiled. "So let's speak freely, shall we? No records, no witnesses, just us." Sterling's face showed perfect disappointment. Kira saw Blackwell's shoulders slump slightly. Malcolm's confidence swelled. He thought he'd won. "Gentlemen," he said, addressing the room, "I respect your service. All of you have given years to this country, taught soldiers, saved lives. You understand better than anyone that sometimes the mission requires difficult choices." "I've made difficult choices," Pierce said quietly. "I chose to bury my son with honors he didn't earn because the government told me his real service was classified. That was difficult. What choice are you here to offer?" Malcolm's jaw tightened. "I'm here to offer Colonel Brennan a dignified resolution to an unfortunate situation." He pulled an envelope from his jacket, set it on the table. Inside is a bank check for $5 million, made out to Kira Brennan, along with documentation for a full retirement package, honorable discharge, all benefits, preservation of rank and privileges. Kira didn't touch the envelope. In exchange for what? She asked. Drop the allegations about equipment failure. Withdraw any claims regarding the Silent Shadow operation. Accept that some classified operations cannot be discussed and move forward with your life. Malcolm spread his hands. $5 million, Colonel. You could retire anywhere. Do anything. Never worry about money again. I'm not worried about money, Kira said. I'm worried about 47 families who were lied to about how their children died. Those families found peace. Why destroy that peace with painful revelations that change nothing? Because the truth changes everything. Kira stood, walked to the wall where Sterling kept his photographs, pointed to Holloway. O'Malley, Donovan, these men died because your company sold faulty equipment to the military. They died calling for help that couldn't hear them because Caldwell Defense cut corners on quality control to maximize profit. Unproven allegations, documented facts, Sterling gestured to the filing cabinets. 32 years of evidence, technical analysis, incident reports, financial records showing your company paid bribes to procurement officials to overlook failure rates that should have triggered recalls. Malcolm's expression hardened. Old men collecting conspiracies. None of that would be admissible in any proceeding. Maybe not, Pierce said. He placed his son's radio on the table. But this would be. Recovered from the field in Iraq, 2003. Caldwell Defense serial number. Same manufacturing defect as the Silent Shadow equipment. Forensic analysis confirms identical failure mode. Malcolm looked at the radio. Something shifted in his eyes. Fear, maybe. Or recognition that this was more than speculation. Where did you get that? He asked. I pulled it from the wreckage of the vehicle where my son died. Kept it, against regulations. But I couldn't let it go. Couldn't accept that he died for nothing. Pierce's voice was steady, ice cold. Now I know he died because your company valued profit over protection. And I want you to look me in the eye and tell me that's acceptable. Malcolm was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, the smooth politician was gone. What remained was harder, colder. Colonel Brennan, I came here to offer you a choice, wealth and peace, or poverty and war. Take the money, retire quietly, live well. And if I refuse, then I make your life hell. Malcolm's voice was flat, matter of fact. You think you've seen your career damaged? You haven't seen anything yet. I have resources you can't imagine, connections that reach into the Pentagon, Congress, the White House. I can make sure you're not just court-martialed. I can make sure you're destroyed. You're threatening a federal officer, Sterling said. I'm stating facts. Colonel Brennan is 56 years old. Her health could deteriorate, stress-related conditions, perhaps a heart attack. These things happen to people under pressure. Malcolm turned his gaze to the other men in the room. And you gentlemen are even older. Falls, strokes, house fires in remote areas. Tragic, but common among the elderly. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Kira felt ice in her veins. Not fear, clarity. Malcolm Whitmore had just confessed to conspiracy and intimidation, and the camera in the wall clock had captured every word. You're willing to kill us, she said, to protect Caldwell Defense. I'm willing to protect my family's legacy. By any means necessary. Malcolm picked up his envelope. Last chance, Colonel. Take the money, walk away, or face consequences you won't survive. Kira walked to the table, looked down at the envelope. $5 million. Safety. Peace. She picked it up. Malcolm smiled. Kira tore the envelope in half, then quarters, then eighths. Let the pieces fall like snow under the floor. Tell whoever sent you, she said quietly, that some of us can't be bought. And tell yourself that when this is over, when Caldwell Defense is bankrupt and you're facing federal charges, You had the chance to do the right thing. You chose profit instead. Malcolm's face went dark with rage. You just sealed your fate. No, you sealed yours. Kira pointed to the clock on the wall. That camera's been recording since you walked in. Every word, every threat, every admission of conspiracy. Malcolm's eyes went to the clock. Understanding dawned, and with it, panic. That recording is inadmissible. Illegal surveillance. In Master Sergeant Sterling's private residence, with his full knowledge and consent, perfectly legal under North Carolina law. Sterling stood. Despite his age, he suddenly looked dangerous. Analog camera, no electronics to jam, no signals to block, just good old-fashioned film and clockwork. You were so busy looking for modern surveillance, you forgot to check the antiques. Malcolm turned toward the door, stopped. His path was blocked by Blackwell and Frost. "Let me leave," Malcolm said. "You can leave," Kira said. "But understand this. That recording goes to the FBI, to the Inspector General, to every news organization in America. Your threats, your bribes, your confession that Caldwell Defense knew about the equipment failures and covered them up. You have no proof. We have your voice, threatening federal officers, admitting to obstruction of justice, implying responsibility for deaths that you called accidents." Kira stepped closer. "You came here to intimidate me. Instead, you gave me everything I need to destroy you. And you did it while so confident in your counter-surveillance that you didn't even think to be careful." Malcolm Whitmore stood frozen. The powerful executive who had entered radiating confidence now looked diminished, cornered, outplayed. "My lawyers will tear this apart," he said. "Maybe, but the families of 47 dead soldiers will hear it first, and they'll want answers. And when they start filing lawsuits, when they start demanding congressional investigations, your lawyers won't matter. The truth will." Malcolm's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Kira thought he might attack, might let rage overcome calculation. Then he walked to the door, paused. "You think you've won," he said, "but you're just one woman. I'm a 4-star general with $800 million and connections you can't match. This isn't over." "You're right," Kira said. "It's not over. It's just beginning. And when it ends, everyone will know what Caldwell Defense did, what you did, what your son helped cover up." Malcolm left. The door closed behind him. Silence filled the farmhouse for a long moment. Then Sterling moved to the clock, removed the camera, checked the recording. Clear video, perfect audio, every word. He looked at Kira. "We got him." But Kira wasn't celebrating. She was thinking about Malcolm's last words, about resources and connections and power that didn't surrender easily. "He's going to escalate," she said. "We just backed him into a corner. Cornered animals are dangerous." "So are old soldiers," Blackwell said. "Let him come. We'll be ready." Kira's phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. A photograph. Malcolm Whitmore's Mercedes SUV, leaving Sterling's farmhouse. Time-stamped, GPS coordinates. Then words. "We're watching too. You're not alone. Harper." Colonel Diana Harper, Inspector General's office. The Pentagon investigator who had been building a case against Caldwell Defense for 18 months. Kira showed the text to Sterling. "Harper's been monitoring Malcolm," she said. "Probably has teams tracking him, recording his movements. Which means everything he just said to us is now part of an official investigation." Kira felt pieces clicking together. Harper wasn't waiting for us to expose Caldwell Defense. She was waiting for them to expose themselves. Malcolm's threats tonight gave her probable cause to move forward. Another text from Harper. "Board inquiry in 48 hours. Be ready. Bring evidence. We end this." Sterling read over Kira's shoulder. "She's making her move," he said, using the inquiry as cover for a larger investigation. "Which means the next 48 hours are critical. Malcolm knows we have the recording. He'll try to discredit it, discredit us, maybe try to silence us permanently before we can testify. Then we don't give him the chance. Blackwell gestured to the other veterans. We stay here, all of us, 8 men with a century of combat experience. Let Malcolm try to silence that. Kira looked around the room at 8 old warriors who had volunteered to stand between her and destruction, who had risked their lives 1,000 times for country and honor, and now risk them once more for truth. Thank you, she said. It still felt inadequate, but their expressions said they understood. Her phone rang. McLeod. Colonel, we have a problem. The inquiry board has been moved up. Tomorrow morning, 900 hours. They're saying it's for scheduling reasons, but Malcolm's trying to force a decision before we can organize our defense, Kira finished. Yes, which gives us less than 12 hours to prepare. I need you at my office. Tonight, we go through everything, build an airtight case. I'm on my way. Kira grabbed her jacket, looked at Sterling. Keep everyone here. Stay alert. Malcolm's going to make a move soon. We'll be ready. You focus on the hearing. We'll watch your back. Kira drove toward Fort Bragg through darkness that felt heavier than usual. Tomorrow morning, she would walk into that inquiry board, would face Drake Whitmore's accusations, would have one chance to tell the truth about Silent Shadow, one chance to honor 3 dead men, one chance to stop a corporation that had killed 47 soldiers for profit. She thought about Eleanor Holloway, about a phone call she would make after the hearing, a phone call that would finally tell the truth about how Wade had died. The ghost was almost ready to speak. Tomorrow, the reckoning would begin. 084, 3 hours. Fort Bragg Main Auditorium. 16 minutes before the inquiry board convenes. The auditorium was built to hold 300 people. This morning it held 412. Every seat filled, aisles crowded, people standing against walls. The overflow of 32 years of silence, finally demanding to be heard. Kira sat at the defense table beside Captain Fiona McLeod. Her dress uniform was perfect, decorations arranged with precision, silver oak leaves catching the overhead lights. She looked like what she was, a career officer with 27 years of exemplary service. She also looked like what the altered record said she wasn't, a combat veteran who had earned every ribbon through blood and sacrifice. Across the aisle, Colonel Drake Whitmore sat with his legal team, 3 JAG officers in crisp uniforms, stacks of documentation that proved Kira Brennan had never been anywhere near Iraq in 1991. That proved Silent Shadow was a fiction. That proved she was a liar trying to salvage a mediocre career with fabricated heroics. Behind Drake, in the front row of the gallery, sat Malcolm Whitmore Sr., 73 years old, 4 stars on his retired uniform, a man who had threatened murder 12 hours ago and now sat calmly as if attending a routine personnel hearing. But Kira saw the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes kept scanning the room, looking for threats, looking for witnesses he couldn't control. He found them in the back rows, 8 old men in service dress uniforms, chests heavy with decorations from wars spanning 6 decades, faces weathered by age and experience, eyes that had seen too much death to fear one more fight. The Marksman Brotherhood. Sterling, Blackwell, Pierce, Frost, 4 others whose names were legend in sniper communities. Men who had taught thousands of soldiers and mourned hundreds of dead students. They sat in silence, ramrod straight, a wall of credibility that Malcolm's lawyers couldn't breach with paperwork. And scattered throughout the auditorium, Kira saw other faces. Older women, elderly couples, people in their 70s and 80s who shouldn't have been at a routine military inquiry. Families. Sterling had contacted them, told them the truth about sons and daughters who had died 30 years ago. Some had refused to listen, hung up, cursed him for disturbing their peace. But 12 families had listened, had demanded to know more, had driven or flown to Fort Bragg to hear the testimony that might finally explain why their children were gone. Among them, in the third row, sat Eleanor Holloway, 81 years old, Wade Holloway's widow, the woman who had called Kira every year for 3 decades, asking about a husband she barely remembered. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Eleanor nodded once, a simple gesture that carried the weight of 32 years. "I'm ready," it said. "Tell me the truth." The side door opened. 5 general officers entered. The Board of Inquiry, called from different bases, different commands, none with connections to Fort Bragg or Caldwell Defense Systems, or so the official roster claimed. Kira recognized one face, Brigadier General Thomas Wade. She'd served under him briefly in 2008. He'd been fair, competent, but he'd also received a consulting contract from Caldwell Defense after his retirement before being recalled to active duty for this board. Malcolm's influence reached everywhere. The board president, Major General Patricia Rawlings, called the hearing to order. This inquiry convenes to examine allegations of service record falsification by Colonel Kira Brennan. Colonel Drake Whitmore has filed formal charges claiming Colonel Brennan made fraudulent statements regarding combat operations not supported by official documentation. Rawlings looked at Kira. "Colonel Brennan, do you understand the charges against you?" Kira stood. "Yes, ma'am." "And how do you plead?" "Not guilty, ma'am, and I request permission to present evidence that the charges themselves are part of a coordinated effort to silence testimony about criminal negligence by a defense contractor." Murmurs rippled through the auditorium. Malcolm's face went rigid. Drake Whitmore shot to his feet. "General Rawlings, this is exactly the kind of deflection we anticipated. Colonel Brennan is attempting to turn her own misconduct into a conspiracy theory to avoid accountability." "Sit down, Colonel Whitmore," Rawlings said. Her voice carried the authority of 3 decades commanding troops. "You'll have your chance to present evidence, but this is an inquiry, not a trial. Colonel Brennan has the right to defend herself fully." Drake sat, but his jaw was clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Rawlings turned back to Kira. "Proceed, Colonel, but understand that wild accusations without evidence will not be tolerated." "I understand, ma'am." Kira nodded to McLeod, who stood and approached the board with a tablet. "General Rawlings, we request permission to present video evidence obtained legally that directly relates to the charges against Colonel Brennan." "What kind of video evidence?" "A recording from last night, in which Malcolm Whitmore Sr. made statements admitting to knowledge of equipment failures, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and threats against federal officers." The auditorium exploded. Reporters in the media section surged forward. Malcolm was on his feet, shouting objections. Drake's legal team erupted in protest. Rawlings banged her gavel. "Order! I will have order, or I will clear this room." The chaos subsided. Slowly, reluctantly, Malcolm remained standing. "That recording is inadmissible. Obtained through illegal surveillance. I was threatened and coerced into making statements under duress." The recording was made in Master Sergeant Vaughn Sterling's private residence, with his full knowledge and consent, McLeod said calmly. "Under North Carolina law, single-party consent makes it entirely legal. And as for duress, the video clearly shows Mr. Whitmore arriving voluntarily, making threats of his own accord, and leaving without restraint." "I want to see this recording before it's shown to the board," Drake demanded. "Denied," Rawlings said. "If it was obtained legally, it's admissible. Captain McLeod, proceed." The lights dimmed. A screen lowered from the ceiling. The video began. Malcolm Whitmore entering Sterling's farmhouse. Confident, powerful, offering $5 million for silence. Then the threats. Clear, unambiguous. Heart attacks, strokes, house fires in remote areas. Tragic but common among the elderly. The auditorium was silent. 412 people watching a 4-star general confess to conspiracy. The video continued, Kira tearing the check. Malcolm's rage, his final threat about resources and connections. When it ended, nobody spoke. Rawlings looked at Malcolm. "General Whitmore, do you deny that's you in the recording?" Malcolm's face was ashen. That conversation was taken out of context. I was speaking hypothetically about the dangers retired officers face. You threatened active duty personnel with violence if they testified about defense contractor negligence. Rawlings cut him off. There's no context that makes that acceptable. She turned to an aide. Contact the FBI and the Inspector General's office. General Whitmore is to be detained for questioning pending investigation into the threats captured on this recording. Two military police officers moved toward Malcolm. He remained standing, frozen, as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "This is a mistake," he said. His voice had lost its authority. "I was protecting my family's business. I was trying to prevent unnecessary pain for military families. By threatening to kill people?" Rawlings' voice was ice. "Take him into custody." Malcolm was let out. The auditorium erupted again. This time Rawlings let it continue for 30 seconds before restoring order. Drake Whitmore sat at his table, pale as chalk. His father had just been arrested. His family's company was now under criminal investigation. Everything was collapsing. But he wasn't done fighting. "General Rawlings," he said, standing, "regardless of my father's inappropriate statements, the core issue remains. Colonel Brennan has claimed combat service that doesn't appear in any official record. The video changes nothing about those allegations." "Then present your evidence, Colonel," Rawlings said. "Let's hear what you have." Drake approached the board with a folder thick with documentation. Colonel Brennan claims she participated in Operation Silent Shadow. February 1991, Iraq. She claims 3 teammates were KIA. Claims she saved a CIA officer named Alden Thatcher. Drake opened the folder. But according to official personnel records, Colonel Brennan was assigned to the 52nd Logistics Battalion in Germany during February 1991. Not Iraq, not any combat zone. He placed documents before the board. Service records, duty rosters, performance reviews, all showing Kira Brennan in Germany. Safe, administrative, nowhere near a desert firefight. Furthermore, Drake continued, there is no official record of any operation called Silent Shadow. No CIA officer named Alden Thatcher appears in any Gulf War documentation. No after-action reports, no casualty notifications, no evidence whatsoever that this operation occurred. He turned to face Kira. Colonel Brennan fabricated this entire story, created a false combat record to qualify for positions she hadn't earned. And now, facing consequences, she's desperately trying to deflect by attacking my family's business. The board members reviewed the documents. Their faces were impassive, professional. But Kira saw doubt creeping in. The paper trail was perfect, too perfect. Caldwell Defense had spent resources creating an unbreakable false narrative. Rawlings looked at Kira. Colonel, these records appear authentic. Can you explain the discrepancy? Kira stood. This was the moment. The choice between silence and truth. Between protecting classification and honoring the dead. She thought about Holloway, O'Malley, Donovan, about 3 men who had died in darkness so she could stand in light. General Rawlings, those records are falsified, altered within the last week to support charges designed to silence me before I could testify about Caldwell Defense Systems' criminal negligence. That's a serious accusation. Can you prove it? I can prove that Operation Silent Shadow existed. I can prove I was there. And I can prove 3 men died because defense contractor equipment failed at a critical moment. Kira turned to the gallery. Master Sergeant Vaughn Sterling, please approach. Sterling stood, walked to the front with the steady gait of a man who had faced worse than inquiry boards. He carried a folder. State your name and qualifications for the record, Rawlings said. Command Sergeant Major Vaughn Sterling, retired, Service dates 1963 to 2001. Sniper instructor, Korean War veteran. Trained approximately 2,300 snipers over 38 years. Sterling's voice filled the auditorium, including Lieutenant Kira Brennan in 1988 and 1989. He opened his folder, pulled out a photograph, placed it before the board. Sniper Qualification Class, Fort Benning, July 1989. That's Brennan, front row, third from left. The photograph showed 20 young soldiers. Kira's face was unmistakable. 22 years old, lean, intense, holding an M24 rifle. I certified her as expert marksman, Sterling continued. Best student I'd trained in 15 years. Natural talent combined with obsessive discipline. She could shoot a dime at 800 yards in crosswind. Drake objected. A training photo doesn't prove combat service. No, but this does. Sterling pulled out another document. Deployment orders. January 1991. Lieutenant K. Brennan assigned to Special Activities Division. Temporary duty. Duration classified. Location classified. Return date, March 1991. He placed the orders before the board. Original documents, stamped and signed. Those orders contradict the personnel records that show her in Germany, Sterling said, which means someone altered those records, recently, to make her service disappear. Rawlings examined the deployment orders. These appear authentic, but Special Activities Division could mean anything. It doesn't confirm Operation Silent Shadow. Then perhaps I can help with that, a voice said from the back of the auditorium. Every head turned. A man walked down the center aisle, 60 years old, 4 stars on his shoulders, silver hair, a limp from an old wound that had never quite healed. General Alden Thatcher. The auditorium went silent. Even the reporters stopped writing. Thatcher walked to the front, stood beside Kira, faced the board. General Rawlings, I'm here to testify about events from February 1991. Events that were classified top secret for 3 decades. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Events that I'm now authorized by the Secretary of Defense to discuss in this proceeding. He pulled a document from his jacket, official letterhead, Secretary of Defense seal. This waiver permits me to confirm the existence of Operation Silent Shadow and my participation in it. It also permits me to confirm that Lieutenant Kira Brennan saved my life during that operation. Rawlings read the waiver. Her expression shifted from skepticism to shock. General Thatcher, are you saying Operation Silent Shadow was real? I'm saying it was real. It happened. And Lieutenant Brennan's service during that operation exceeded any standard of heroism I've witnessed in 40 years of military service. Thatcher turned to face the auditorium, addressing not just the board but the families in the gallery, the reporters, the witnesses to history being rewritten in real time. February 24th, 1991, I was a CIA officer embedded with a 5-person special operations team called Silent Shadow. Our mission was to extract intelligence from an Iraqi Republican Guard compound. The operation went perfectly until our Caldwell Defense tactical radios failed simultaneously. His voice was steady, clinical, but his eyes held old pain. We lost all communication with air support, with command, with each other. In that moment, we became isolated in hostile territory with no way to call for help. 3 operators died covering my extraction. Gunnery Sergeant Wade Holloway, Staff Sergeant Finn O'Malley, Corporal Lucas Donovan. In the 3rd row, Eleanor Holloway made a sound, half gasp, half sob, the truth she'd waited 32 years to hear. Lieutenant Brennan provided overwatch, Thatcher continued. When the radios failed, she couldn't coordinate with the team, couldn't call air support, but she could shoot. And she did. Each one necessary to keep us alive long enough to extract. He looked at Kira. Something passed between them. Gratitude. Respect. The bond between people who had survived hell together. When the ground team was overrun, Lieutenant Brennan came down from her position, carried me 4 miles through hostile desert while taking sporadic fire, saved my life, saved the intelligence I was carrying. That intelligence changed the course of the war. Thatcher faced the board again. Operation Silent Shadow was classified because it exposed catastrophic failures in equipment purchased from Caldwell Defense Systems. Equipment that cost 3 operators their lives. The government chose to bury the truth rather than admit we deployed soldiers with faulty gear. Rawlings was pale. Why reveal this now? Because Lieutenant Brennan, now Colonel Brennan, is being accused of fabricating the service record I just confirmed. Because the company whose negligence killed 3 soldiers is now trying to silence the one witness who survived. Because 32 years of lying to protect a defense contractor is 32 years too long. Drake Whitmore stood. His voice was shaking. You can't just declassify operations because it's convenient. I didn't declassify it. The Secretary of Defense did. After reviewing evidence that Caldwell Defense Systems has been falsifying equipment test data and bribing procurement officials for 3 decades. Thatcher pulled out another document. This is a federal warrant, issued this morning, authorizing the FBI to seize all records from Caldwell Defense Systems related to tactical communications equipment manufactured between 1985 and 2005. He placed it before the board. Colonel Drake Whitmore, you're being investigated for conspiracy to obstruct justice and accessory to fraud. Your charges against Colonel Brennan are part of that conspiracy, and this inquiry board is being used as cover for criminal activity. The auditorium erupted, reporters rushing for doors, phones appearing despite regulations. The story of the decade breaking in real time. Military police entered, surrounded Drake Whitmore. Colonel Whitmore, you're ordered to remain on base pending investigation. Your security clearance is suspended. You're relieved of all duties, effective immediately. Drake looked around wildly, at the MPS, at his father's empty seat, at Kira standing calm and steady while his world collapsed. This isn't over, he said. My family's lawyers. Your family's lawyers are about to be very busy defending against federal charges, Thatcher said. Sit down, Colonel. You're done. Drake sat. The MPs remained at his shoulders. Rawlings banged her gavel. This inquiry is suspended pending review of new evidence. Colonel Brennan, you're released from restriction. Charges dismissed pending formal investigation into their origin. She stood. The other board members followed. They filed out, leaving chaos behind. Kira remained at her table, frozen. 3 decades of silence shattered in 30 minutes. The truth finally spoken. The dead finally honored. Sterling approached, placed a hand on her shoulder. You did it, kid. Eleanor Holloway was next. The elderly woman moved slowly through the crowd, tears streaming down her weathered face. Colonel Brennan, she said. Her voice was paper thin. Was he brave? When Wade died, was he brave? Kira took Eleanor's hands, looked into eyes that had waited 32 years for truth. He was the bravest man I ever knew, Kira said. His last act was pushing a wounded officer towards safety, buying time with his own life so others could survive. He died a hero, Mrs. Holloway. A real hero. And I'm sorry it took this long to tell you. Eleanor collapsed into Kira's arms, sobbing, grieving, but also healing, finally knowing her husband had died with honor. Other families approached, mothers, fathers, siblings, all wanting to hear about loved ones who had died in operations that officially never happened. Kira spoke to each one, told them what she knew, what Sterling had researched, what forensic evidence suggested. 47 soldiers, 47 families, 47 truths finally spoken. The auditorium gradually emptied. Reporters departed to file stories. Families left to process revelations. MP escorted Drake Whitmore to confinement. Eventually, only the Marksman Brotherhood remained. 8 old soldiers standing guard over one younger one who had finally stopped fighting alone. "What happens now?" Kira asked. "Now the federal investigation proceeds," Thatcher said. He'd remained after giving testimony. "Caldwell defense will face criminal charges, civil lawsuits from families, congressional hearings. The company won't survive." "And Malcolm? Drake?" "Malcolm's facing federal charges, threatening officers, conspiracy, obstruction. The prosecutors are confident he'll likely serve time." Thatcher paused. "Drake's cooperating, turned witness against his father. He'll probably avoid prison in exchange for testimony, but his career is over. Dishonorable discharge is certain." Kira nodded, but she felt hollow. 3 decades carrying silence. Now that weight was gone, and she didn't know what to fill the space with. Sterling seemed to read her thoughts. "You're thinking about what comes next. What you do now that the fight's over." "Is it over?" "The main battle, but wars have aftermath." Sterling gestured to the empty auditorium. 47 families just learned their loved ones died because of corporate negligence. They'll need someone to help them navigate what comes next. Someone who understands what it means to carry the dead. Understanding dawned. "You're saying I should help them." "I'm saying you spent 32 years being the only witness. Now you can be the guide who helps others find truth." Sterling smiled. "Besides, there's still a promotion board in 6 weeks and a training program that needs a general officer to lead it." 6 weeks later, Fort Bragg, 1,000 hours, promotion ceremony. The parade ground was filled with soldiers in dress uniform, family members in civilian clothes, reporters kept at a respectful distance by military police. Colonel Kira Brennan stood at attention before a reviewing stand, 56 years old, about to become the first female sniper promoted to general officer in Army history. The officiant was General Alden Thatcher, the man she'd saved 32 years ago, now repaying a debt that could never truly be balanced. Colonel Kira Brennan has demonstrated exceptional leadership, tactical expertise, and moral courage throughout 27 years of distinguished service, Thatcher read from the citation. Her contributions to special operations, training development, and institutional reform have strengthened our military and honored those who serve. He paused, met her eyes. But more than that, she has shown us that truth matters. That honor isn't just following orders, but standing up when orders are wrong. That the hardest battles aren't always fought with weapons, but with words and conscience, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for what's right. Kira's mother stepped forward, Grace Brennan, 73 years old, silver hair perfectly styled, eyes bright with tears and pride. She held a single star, Brigadier General rank insignia. With trembling hands, Grace pinned the star to her daughter's shoulder. "Your father would be so proud," Grace whispered, "and so am I." Kira embraced her mother, let herself feel the moment, the culmination of decades fighting to be seen, to be heard, to matter. When they separated, she saw Eleanor Holloway in the front row, the widow who had become a friend, who had testified before Caldwell Defense's negligence, who had helped bring down a corporation that had killed her husband. Eleanor was crying, but she was also smiling, holding a photograph of Wade in his dress uniform. He should have been here, Kira thought. They all should have. The ceremony concluded. Kira inspected troops, shook hands, posed for photographs, played the role of newly promoted general with grace and professionalism. But her mind was elsewhere, thinking about 3 men who would never see this day, who had died in darkness so she could stand in light. Before leaving for Arlington, Kira found Colonel Pierce standing alone near the parade ground. He held the battered radio, his son's radio, that had been evidence in the inquiry. "Colonel Pierce," she said. He turned. His eyes were wet. 20 years I've carried this," he said, holding up the radio. 20 years I've kept it in my office, my workshop. Couldn't let it go because it was the last thing ever touched." Kira said nothing. Sometimes silence was the only appropriate response to grief. But now, Pierce's voice caught, now Everett's name is going on a memorial. The truth about how he died is in congressional record. The company that killed him is facing justice. He looked at the radio. I don't need to carry this anymore, do I? No, sir, Kira said. You can let it go. Pierce nodded, walked to a nearby trash receptacle, stopped. Couldn't do it. Kira gently took the radio from his hands. I'll make sure it goes to the right place. The Army Museum. Evidence of what happened. Everett's story will be told. Pierce's shoulders shook. Thank you. He walked away. Kira held the radio, added it to her own burdens to carry forward. Because that's what warriors did. That evening, Arlington National Cemetery, Section 60. The cemetery was quiet. Spring flowers bloomed around white headstones. The sun set in shades of orange and gold. Kira stood before 3 graves, no longer marked as training accidents, no longer lies carved in stone. The new headstones were simple, honest. Gunner Away, 1956 to 1991. Operation Silent Shadow, killed in action, Iraq, husband, father, hero. Staff Sergeant Finn O'Malley, 1959 to 1991. Operation Silent Shadow, killed in action, Iraq, son, brother, warrior. Corporal Lucas Donovan, 1962 to 1991. Operation Silent Shadow, killed in action, Iraq, beloved son, forever young. Kira placed 17 brass casings on the graves, 1 for each kill, each one polished, each one marked with a number from 1 to 17. The 17th casing, the one Caldwell Defense had tried to erase, sat in the center, the number carved deep, permanent, undeniable. I kept my promise, she said quietly. Told them the truth, all of it. Your families know you died as heroes. The world knows. And Caldwell Defense is finished. She paused, listening to wind in the trees, to traffic in the distance, to the sound of a nation that kept turning while soldiers died in forgotten places. The training programs approved, full funding, will teach a new generation to survive what we didn't. Maybe some of them will make it home when they shouldn't have. Like I did. Like you didn't. Her voice caught. Even after 32 years, the grief was fresh. I wish you were here. Wish you could see what we built from your sacrifice. Wish I could tell you it was worth it. Footsteps approached. Sterling, still vigorous at 78, still keeping watch over soldiers living and dead. He stood beside her, said nothing, just presence, support, understanding. They'd be proud of you, he said finally, every single one of them. Would they? I survived. They didn't. What's proud about that? You survived and made it matter. Turned their deaths into justice, into change, into legacy. Sterling gestured at the honest headstones. That's what warriors do. We carry the dead forward, make sure they're remembered, make sure they count. Kira nodded, but the weight remained, would always remain. They stood in silence as sunset deepened to dusk. 2 survivors keeping vigil over ghosts. Finally, Sterling spoke again. The first class starts Monday. 30 female recruits, Precision Marksman Program. Captain McLeod's niece, Skylar, is among them. I know, reviewed her file. She's qualified, motivated, reminds me of someone. Yeah, she does, Sterling smiled. You ready to teach the next generation? Kira thought about a 22-year-old recruit learning to shoot, about passing forward skills that could save lives, about the endless cycle of warriors training warriors to survive wars that never quite ended. I'm ready, she said. They walked back through the cemetery, past thousands of white stones, past generations of soldiers who had given everything for a nation that kept asking for more. At the entrance, a young woman waited, Captain Fiona McLeod, recently promoted for her work exposing the Caldwell defense conspiracy. General Brennan, McLeod said. The new rank still sounded strange. There's someone who wants to meet you. A girl stepped forward, 19 years old, lean, intense eyes, wearing Army combat uniform with the fresh insignia of a private first class. General Brennan, I'm Private Schuyler McLeod. I wanted to thank you for fighting, for making it possible for women like me to serve as snipers. Kira studied the young soldier, saw herself 3 decades ago, full of confidence and ignorance about what war would cost. You don't need to thank me, Private. Just be the best you can be. Learn everything, master your craft, and when the time comes, bring your people home. All of them if you can, some of them if you must, but bring them home. Schuyler nodded, understanding the weight behind the words, even if she didn't yet know the cost. I will, ma'am. I promise. Good. I'll see you Monday, 0600, Range 3. Bring your rifle and your dedication. Leave your doubts behind. Schuyler saluted, turned to leave, stopped. Ma'am, one more thing. I keep a photograph of you on my wall, from that Marine Corps Times article. You're holding an M24, looking at the camera like you could shoot through it. I remember that photo. I look at it every morning to remind myself that if you could do it, I can too. That women belong in combat, that we're not asking for permission anymore. We're claiming our right. Kira felt something shift, a burden lifting, a torch passing. Then do me proud, Private, and when you're standing where I'm standing 3 decades from now, make sure the next generation has it easier than we did. Schuyler saluted again. This time Kira returned it, a gesture between warriors, between past and future, between the ghost who had fought in silence and the soldier who would fight in light. McLeod and Schuyler departed, leaving Kira and Sterling alone in the gathering darkness. She'll be good, Sterling said. Has the fire, needs polish, but has the foundation. She reminds me of someone I used to know, Kira said. Yeah, scared kid who showed up at Fort Benning in '88 thinking she could be a sniper. Spent 6 months proving everyone wrong. That kid didn't know what she was getting into. No, but she figured it out, survived it, transcended it. Sterling looked at the star on her shoulder. And now she gets to make sure the next kid has better odds. They walked to their vehicles. Spring night air cool and clean. Fort Bragg lights glowing in the distance. A military installation that never slept, that never stopped preparing for wars that never quite ended. Sterling, Kira said as they reached the parking lot, thank you for everything, for training me, for believing in me, for standing with me when it mattered. Don't thank me, you did the hard part. I just reminded you who you were when everyone else tried to make you forget. Still, thank you. Sterling nodded, started to get in his truck, stopped. Kira, one last thing. That night in Iraq, you know those kills weren't what made you a sniper, right? What do you mean? I mean, killing 17 people doesn't make you a warrior. Carrying 3 dead friends for 32 years and still standing, that's what makes you a warrior. Never forget the difference. He drove away. Kira stood alone in the parking lot, a newly promoted general, a survivor of operations that officially hadn't existed, a woman who had spent 3 decades carrying ghosts and had finally found a way to set them down without forgetting them. She pulled out her phone, dialed a number she'd called once a year for 32 years. Eleanor Holloway answered on the second ring. Kira, she said. First names now. Friends forged through shared grief. How was the promotion? Bittersweet, wish Wade could have seen it. He did. Wherever he is, he saw, and he's proud. Eleanor's voice was steady, strong in ways it hadn't been 6 weeks ago. Truth had given her something lies never could. I'm proud, too, of what you built from what we lost. I'm starting the training program Monday, teaching young women to be snipers, to survive what I barely survived. Then Wade's death meant something. That's all any of us can ask. that the loss counts for something. They talk for 20 minutes about mundane things, about Eleanor's grandchildren, about Kira's mother, about life that continued despite death. When they hung up, Kira felt lighter. The ghosts weren't gone, would never be gone, but they felt less heavy, less like burdens and more like companions on a journey that wasn't over. She drove back to Fort Bragg, past the parade ground where she'd been promoted, past the headquarters where she'd been accused, past the ranges where she'd proved her skill when proof was demanded. Tomorrow she would walk into a classroom full of young women who wanted to be snipers, who wanted to prove that gender didn't determine capability, who wanted to serve a country that was slowly learning to let them. And she would teach them, not just marksmanship, not just tactics, but the deeper truth that Sterling had taught her 34 years ago, that being a warrior wasn't about killing, it was about carrying your mission, carrying your people, carrying your dead forward into meaning. 17 kills had made headlines, but 32 years of carrying 3 ghosts with honor that had made her who she was, the ghost operator, finally visible, finally heard, finally able to pass the torch to hands that wouldn't have to fight as hard to hold it. She thought about Skylar McLeod, about a 19-year-old girl with fire in her eyes and no idea what lay ahead. Monday would come soon enough, and with it, the next chapter. The legacy built on blood and brass, and 3 men who had died so truth could live. Kira parked outside her quarters, looked up at stars that didn't care about human wars or human grief. Stars that had watched her fight in Iraq and watched her fight in North Carolina and would watch whatever came next. They tried to bury us, she whispered to the night, to the ghosts, to the memory of 3 men whose names were finally carved in honest stone. They didn't know we were seeds, and in the morning she would bloom.